Yo, 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 what is going on, everybody? Gabriel Santos here. I just wanted to share a quick story from 2019 when I didn't smoke weed at all for a whole year, right? And the purpose is to support you, specifically those of you who, you know, it was a common experience for me to be solid like all throughout the day, but then it's those last like 4 to 6 hours of the day, like the 7 p.m. to 2 a.m. where our day is done and we're just kind of sitting with ourselves at the end of the day. And if you're someone who is used to smoking weed during that time, when you don't have weed, you can find yourself, you know, your habits and your body being used to having the weed. And so naturally, you're really going to want to do it. Um, and so, my hope is that this video gives some insight as to handle those 5 to 6 hours at the end of the day, or just any time that you typically would normally smoke, but now because you're committed to this journey, that's not an option, right? And so in 2019, um, you know, the classic thing is to have a craving that says something like, man, I really want to smoke right now, or man, a joint at the end of my day sounds great, right? Or a joint at the end of this social gathering, or at the end of this whatever, like it sounds like a nice nightcap, or topping off your day, right? And what happened was early on in 2019, I had this craving, this hardcore craving, like fuck. I was at a Dodger game, and good times were rolling. We won the game, but during the game, I had this idea of like, fuck. After this game, I'm gonna go home and smoke a bleezy or a joint or something. And the first time that this happened, this craving happened at the Dodger game, I was dead set on doing it. Like I was like, I was not connected to my vision. I was not connected to my commitment, and the craving was running the show. And I had negotiated my way to the point where, like, on the drive home, like I was going to go to the dispensary. Like shit was gonna happen. But long story short, I didn't get it right. For some way or another, I made the decision to not follow through with that craving. And what I discovered the next day was that, like, the craving was there, the craving was present, but I didn't have to satisfy it. Like, just because the craving was there, just because the idea is there, or the thought to smoke is there, that doesn't mean I have to honor it. That doesn't mean I have to abide by it. And I realized that, like, the craving is just kind of like a passing, fleeting moment, and that it's really all just in our heads. There's nothing that says I have to fulfill the craving. There's nothing that says the craving, there's nothing, nobody said you even have to do anything about it. Like, at the end of the day, it's just a thought in your head. And so I have a billion thoughts a day in my head that I don't act on, right? And the key thing that I want you to get is this: I had similar thought cravings, literally the exact same thoughts. Like, I went to many Dodger games that year, and I'm almost certain in every single Dodger game, at some point throughout the game, a passing thought came through my mind of, oh my God, you know what sounds so good right now? A joint at the end of this game. Almost every single time. Even though I hadn't smoked for X months, even though I knew I was committed to a full year weed free, the thought still came up. But my point is this: like, consider, think of a dog, right? You know those little clickers that people use to train their dogs, where they say sit and the dog sits, and then they click, and then they give the treat. What they're doing is they're associating the click with the treat, and the treat is associated with doing the right action. But what the trainer is doing is, he doesn't need the treat all the time, he has the clicker be associated with the treat. And so the clicker then becomes this signal to the dog of reward, of cueing, of priming the dog to do an action. The clicking sound, okay? So consider that your thoughts are literally just sounds. Or, for example, let's say let's say you just got trained. Think of the bell at school, like the bell rings, you go to class. Or my point is this: the thoughts aren't even you. They're literally just sounds in your head. They're cues in your head. And like a dog, if every time you have a thought that says I want to smoke and you honor that cue, what you're doing is you're training yourself. Oh, every time that cue, the sound, the thought that says, hey, let's smoke weed later, and you honor that by smoking, you're literally training yourself to smoke anytime you think those thoughts. And so the only way, not the only way, but the way that I was able to no longer be like a fucking trained dog to those thoughts is you have to unwire it and retrain. And so in that first Dodger game, right, the thought came up, we gotta smoke later. Hell yeah. There I was like a fucking dog, right? Okay, let's go get the fucking weed, right? But then I didn't. And so I retrained myself that every time that thought comes up, we don't do it. And what happened is there was a sense of accomplishment and breakthrough every time I would say no. And so that was a good feeling because I felt good about following through on my goals, right? That's why we all feel good the next day when we follow through with our goals, or when we, don't do what we said we're not going to do. Okay? So this is all about retraining yourself. Every time that the thought, guys, the sound, right? The sound that goes, hey, we should smoke weed. Baby boo boo weed, right? It's just a sound. It just so happens that these sounds equal words that we can communicate, right? But it's just a sound, right? It's just noise coming out of my mouth. And so consider that right now, or not even that, consider that you've trained yourself subconsciously, unconsciously, like a dog. That, oh my God, okay, every time it's 6:30 p.m., I have a thought that says, we should go smoke. And I have a feeling that says, yeah. And so then what do? I go do it, right? Like a dog, like a fucking dog. And because you've always said yes to every fucking craving, what the fuck do you think you're gonna want to do? Right? If you guys have ever seen the show The Office, you remember that episode where Jim trains Dwight to reach his hand out for an Altoid. And how does Jim do that? He cues Dwight with the sound of a computer. And so every time Jim would make the sound of the computer, give Dwight the Altoid. Make the sound of the computer, give Dwight the Altoid. And eventually what happened is Jim made the sound of the computer, but he didn't offer Dwight the Altoid. So he made the sound of the computer and Dwight put his hand out, expecting the Altoid, because he's literally trained to put his hand out for an Altoid when the computer sound is made. And so just like fucking Dwight, every time it's a certain time of the day, you cue yourself. Let's go smoke weed. And so then what do? Okay? And so the only way, not the only way, like I said, what you gotta do, what I encourage you to do, is that when the cue comes up, 7 o'clock, let's go smoke the weed, you're gonna feel the urge, but in order to retrain yourself, instead of doing this, do this. Stay firm. And what's gonna happen is you're gonna rewire your brain. You're gonna retrain yourself, right? So then moving forward, when the thought comes up, we should go smoke weed, you have a new set of options, right? You can be like, does that make sense? There's gonna be space for you to actually make a decision instead of it being fucking automated like a fucking trained dog, right? I don't mean to compare you to a trained dog, but in terms of like addiction and dependence and like just straight habits and psychology, the same phenomenon that occurs in a dog when he's trained like that is the same kind of phenomenon that occurs in us when we are so trained to a certain action. And consider that we're trained in a lot of different ways. Like, you get up at 6 a.m. for work, you're trained. Every time you're hungry, you go eat, you're trained. It just so happens that the way that you've trained yourself with marijuana currently is not serving you. And so it's gotten to the point now where you're willing to, not you specifically, but it got to the point for me where I was willing to neglect everything in favor of following through on smoking weed. Straight up. Okay, and so hopefully that made sense. I think it did. My whole point is that as you retrain yourself, it does get easier. And so the thoughts come up and you don't automatically smoke anymore because you've trained yourself to not follow through on smoking like a dog anytime the thought comes up. All right, I think I've said that enough times. Anyways, hope you all doing good. Day 2 complete. You're doing it, baby. You're doing it. Day 3 tomorrow. Stay tuned. Peace.